So welcome to Tuesday, the 18th of October. We are going to continue on where we were yesterday, excuse me, and that is working with this thing that we're creating right now. All right, this MongoDB underscore REST API. So we went in, we did all the typical stuff we do at the beginning of a program yesterday, as far as we set up our app.js, we set up our we did our npm init, we did an install of NodeMon, we did an install where we added some packages that were new and some that we've added before. All right, and then we went in and actually started to write some code. All right, what made yesterday different from what we've done previously is we have started to implement the model view controller, or the MVC architecture, in here. So in other words, what we did yesterday was, rather than putting everything in app.js, we instead created an API folder, and underneath there we added a controllers folder, which has a users.js file in it, and a models folder, which has users.js in it. Now, in both of those today, in both the controllers folder and in the models folder, we're going to add a movies.js file. In the same way, we're going to add a movies.js file into the routes folder. So that's kind of what's on tap for today. So I'm going to start by going into the models folder right here. I'm going to right mouse click on it and choose new file and type in movies.js. Now, I mentioned to you yesterday, I'm saying it again today, and that is that as we do this, all right, as we go through here and as we do this, you can use your own stuff. In other words, you can use your own database, or you can use mine, because I'm using mine, all right, because that's what I had been working with. So I'm going to come in here, and typically, or just about always, if not always, when you're doing anything in the models, the first thing you're going to typically do is say const mongoose equals require mongoose to give us all of the mongoose package functionality. All right, the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to define the schema. Put a little bit of white space in here. All right, so I'm going to say const schema equals mongoose dot schema. All right, and then we're going to create the schema. So since it's movies file, it seemed to make sense to call it movie schema. And that's going to be equal to a new schema. All right, and again, I put in my, I don't know what it is, 5 fields I think that I have in here. So I had a title, and that title was of type string. I set the trim to true, just so it is trimmed if there's any extraneous blank spaces before or after, and I made it required. All right, so that was the first field. Then next, I had year made. And again, like I said, if you decide you're going to use your own in here, that's cool. There's no problem with that. But then what I'd like you to do is, like I said, you're going to have to go in and make these changes to yours. So this was type number. I again set trim to true. And I again set required to true. And again, I'm not putting a lot of messages here. We could do that if we wanted to. All right. I actually went online and I looked to see when the first movie ever was made, and they claimed it was 1896. So that's what I put in there. And for a max, I put in 2023. Now, just so you're aware of this, it would certainly be possible, if you go in and you look at the different data types, rather than making this a number, there is a way you can make this a date field and then just hack off the year part. I didn't want to go to all that trouble for what we're doing here. But again, that is possible to do is what I'm telling you. So we've got a title, we've got a year made, and let's continue on then. So the next one was called running time. All right, and again, it was type number. Again, I said trim to true and required to true. And here, I thought about it and I thought, well, a movie of any size is going to be at least an hour. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it would be. And even a really long documentary, typically I put a max in here of 600. I figured that 10 hours would be plenty big for anything that we're going to put in here. Again, that could always be changed if need be, but I really and truly myself didn't see a need probably for having to do that. All right, I had two more fields in here. The next one was category. And again, it was of type string. Again, trim was set to true. And again, required was set to true. Now, when you go through this, one thing to think about, could I have come in here with an array and put in all the different types? Yes, but there's at least a chance that array could constantly be being updated. If somebody came out with a new type of movie, all right, then maybe we'd have to update it. So I just left it in there as a string. But again, if we wanted to make an array in here and have things like action, horror, sci-fi, adventure, sports, etc., that could be done as well. All right, and then finally we had a rating. And again, this looks just like the other one. The type is string, the trim is true, and the required is true. So I'm just going to copy all that and put it in there. All right. So that is the schema. Taking it from the top then. Better spell that correctly. All right. Const mongoose equals require mongoose. Const schema equal mongoose.schema. Then set up the schema with the 5 fields, the title field, the year made field, the running time field, the category field, and the rating field. But again, remember that as of right now, all this information is only known, it's only known within this particular file itself. So we want to do a module dot exports equals mongoose dot model. In fact, now that I'm looking at this, hold on a sec. It's the right code, but that should come after this. There we go. So mongoose dot exports, mongoose dot exports, module dot exports equals mongoose dot model. And remember, this is what it's going to be referred to in the collection. So it'll be called movies. What'll happen is, again, we talked about this in an earlier class. Some of the Mongoose middleware will automatically make this pluralized and make the collection name lowercase. So even though we're calling it movie right here, it will be called movies with a lowercase m. All right. And we also have to put the schema in here. All right. Okay, so that's it for that particular file. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to set up a controller for that file, and we have to set up a route for that file. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's going to involve quite a bit of code. So let's get to it. I'm going to come in here and do a file save. I may have to use this file later. I don't know, but I'm going to close just about everything else that I've got open right now. I'll keep the app.js open. All right, but the next thing I want to do is I want to go into my controllers file, which again only has a users, but just like the model, I want to put a movies.js in there as well. So I'm coming in here and I am going to right mouse click on controllers, choose new file, and make a movies.js file right here. All right. And I don't know how many lines this is, but it's a few. All right. First thing we want to do is we want to say const movie model. Let me close this again. There we go. So const movie model equals mongoose.model, and it's the one that was called movie. And we're going to be using the movie schema. All right. In fact, I don't know what I'm doing. Forget this. That's wrong. I've got notes that I'm going off of. I'm sorry. And I read one line, part of one line and one note and one in the other. Let's change this. This is require. That's what it is. So it's require. Now, from where we are right now, we've got to go .. and you'll notice that one of the things in there is models. And if we do a slash again, you'll notice that now what's in there is movies. All right. You don't need to put in the .js right there. So what we're saying is our movie model that we are about to be working on, it's going to require us being able to use that movie model, or really movie schema, that we just created. All right. So I'm going to put a module.exports at the top here. All right. And there's going to be quite a bit of code that's going to be in here. And what kind of code? Well, now we have to start thinking about how we're going to handle this stuff using the different MongoDB commands that we've learned. All right. Now I may be using some, like the first one we're going to use is going to be get by ID. And that may be one we've used before. That may not be one we've used before. But if it's not, you can always, again, go out to the mongoosejs.com and then go to the read the docs, go under models, and it should show you down there or in there all of the different types of things that we can use. All right. I just went through it, and these are the ones that I picked out. So this first one is get by ID, and it'll be require and a response. And I put a next in there as well. Then our fat arrow. So again, this is going to allow us, this is what will happen here is we're going to test all of this stuff, probably not till tomorrow, but when we do, and we go in and we create this and start adding some movies, etc. to it, if we want to be able to search for a specific movie, if we know that movie's ID, we'll be able to specify that then in our line that we put in our address bar. And this is the one that will be called. All right. Now, we can do a console.log on this and just put in here request.body if we want to do that, just to see everything that's in there. All right. Do we have to do that? No. But again, it's something that we can do. All right. Now, what we're working with in here, remember, we're doing the get by ID, but we're using the movie model. All right. So we're going to come in here and say movie model dot, and we're going to use the find. Notice how the IntelliSense is kicking in. Find by ID, and that'll be request.params.movie ID. All right. Now, when I'm doing this movie ID. Try that again. All right. This name should be the same name that we used. All right. And that should be the same name that it's going to be given by the system. All right. We'll find out, because if for some reason it gets screwed up, you're going to know when I know. All right. So we've got this. When we do this, as oftentimes happens, all right, well, either it's going to fail, which means we're going to get an error, all right, or it's going to succeed. And if it succeeds, we can call this results, but I just called it movie info because that's what it's going to be giving back to us, is all of the different information that we have about the movie. All right. So again, you saw this kind of thing yesterday. If there's an error, next error. So again, that'll handle any condition where we put in an ID that doesn't exist, all right? Because either we removed it or we typed it in wrong or whatever, all right? So if we get down to the else here, well, we were able to find it. All right, so this is going to be the case in which there was no movie with that ID. This will be the case where we found a match. So we're going to do a res.json, and I put this over 3 lines. You didn't have to, but so I said status. I don't know why it does that sometimes. And I just said success. And then the message that goes along with that, you could say anything you want. I just said movie found. All right. And then finally, we need the data. Well, the data is the information about the movie. So we don't want to say data null here as we had done a couple times previously. We want to say for the data, and we're going to say here, movies, movie info. All right, so movies is the name of the collection. Movie info is what we referred to our model up here. All right, so those are the 3 pieces of data that we're going to grab. All right, and again, my hope is at least that what I'm going through with you here, at least somewhat, makes some sense. All right, now you may or may not find what I'm about to say, you may or may not agree with, but when you look here, you may want to even think about, well, there's a curly, and that curly technically ends here. All right. So you may want to think of, well, maybe I even should put in, I should maybe come in here and put in some comments, so I know what goes with what, etc. You can do that. You can not do that. And whether you do it or not is your business more than it is mine. All right. So that's the first one. So basically, again, that's going to be to get a single movie. I'll even put a comment up here. Attempt to get a single movie by the movie ID. All right. Well, the other thing that we might want to be able to do is attempt to get all movies. All right. And we've talked about this before. You've seen this kind of thing before in Postman, where we have gone through and we have done a get, and you've had just like a slash movies and it shows you everything. And you've had it with a slash movies with when you put a slash and then put an ID in there. So we've seen both. So in here, well, we have to store this someplace, all right? Because we want to show it to the user. So now I said let movies, and instead of movie, because there's multiple, I said movies list equals this. Now that should make sense to you. What we're doing right there is we're creating an empty array. All right, we are creating an empty array right there. All right. Okay, so then what we want to do is we basically want to loop through and we want to show all those movies. So what we're going to end up doing is, as always, when you go through this stuff, it can either error out or it can show us all the movies. So we're going to check for that right now. But what we will end up doing is for each movie, we are going to take each field. We are going to take each field that's in here, and we're going to end up pushing that particular field to this movies list array. All right. And then when we're done, we'll send back a success message or something else, that says movie list found or whatever. All right. So to do that, again, I'm going to say movie model dot find, and you know what the dot find is. We've done enough of those. All right. And we're not putting any criteria in there whatsoever. We could technically leave that blank, but typically when you want to show everything and you're not putting in any criteria, you put an empty set of curly braces in there. All right, and that's what that signifies. So again, I can either have back returned an error or my list of movies. All right. And if there's an error, you've seen this multiple times now. All right. We will do a next error. All right. I'm thinking right here. We left off a line, and I apologize. Geez, Louise. There should be a line right up above this get movies list right here. Let me put that line in right now. So attempt to get all movies. That line should have said get all. And we have our rec, our res, and a next. All right. And I'll have to put this curly down at the bottom. So that'll go down here. All right, so let's go back over all of this again. All right, let's go back over all this and see if we can get this thing to work. All right, we did the get by ID. All right, and now we're doing a get all. All right, not sure why it's giving me that, so let's see. Again, it's saying that's expected. I don't know why. Typically, that means there's something up here where I should have put in a comma or something and didn't, but I'm looking for a place and I don't see it. So hopefully this will work its way out, this error. This get all is going to allow us to create an empty array that we are calling movie list. All right, we are going to populate the movies list that you see right there. We are going to populate that array with everything that is in our movie model. In other words, with all of the documents that are going to make up that movies collection. When we attempt to do this, all right, we want to do a find to find us everything. It'll either succeed or fail. If it fails, we're basically just going to push the error off. So if we get down here to the else, all right, there were movies to be found. I'd like to put this on another line. You don't have to do that, but I like to do that. All right. So when we come in here, well, what do we have to do? Well, basically, we're going to want to do this possibly once, possibly twice. If we have 100 movies, we want to do this 100 times, which really, when you think about it, all right, should necessitate us using some kind of a for loop. And I used a for of here. So I said for let movie of movies. So in other words, this is going to iterate through the entire list of movies that we have. All right, and I'm going to say movies list dot, and you'll notice when I type in a P, push is one of the ones that's there. All right, why? Because again, what we want to do in here is we want to now go in and take our 6 fields, our ID, our title, our year made, our running time, our category, and our rating. We want to take those 6 different fields and we want to push them. We want to push them to this movie list array. And again, we don't need to know how many there are because we put this into a for loop. So we've got an ID. I'm just going to move this over a little. And this is movie dot, and I think it's underscore ID. We'll find out when we run this later. Every movie has a title, if you remember. And that is movie dot title. It has a year made. And that's movie dot year made. It has a running time. And again, that is movie dot running time. And it has a rating. All right. And that will be movie dot rating. All right. So at least ideally, what's going to happen in this else is we have movies. So we're going to loop through the list of movies that we have, and we're going to fill up we're going to fill up an array with those. All right. Now, once we fall out of the for loop, once we've fallen out of that, well, we want to be able to display this stuff. So we're going to do a res.json. All right. And kind of like we did before, we'll have here status, success, and we'll have in here, boy, oh boy, a message. And we'll just say like movie list found. You could put whatever you wanted to put in there. It really wouldn't matter. All right. And finally, we'll have data. And just like we had before, for that data, it's going to be movies, and it's going to be our movie list. All right. And wrap your head around that. So let's see. This curly right here, or that parenthesis goes with that parenthesis. That curly goes with that curly, and that curly goes with that curly. All right. So that's the second one that we wanted to work with. So far, we've done our get one and we've done our get all. All right. So we've done the R in CRUD, for lack of better words. All right. And I'm looking in here, let's see, it looks like, yeah, that goes with that. It's so easy, as you can tell, to come in here and miss a curly or whatever. I don't think I'm missing anything, but could I be missing something? You bet I could be missing something. All right. It says this parser expected to find a right curly brace to match the token up above, and I think it goes here. All right. Doesn't look like it likes that either. So I'm just going to leave it like that and hope that this works its way out later. All right. So I've done two things. All right. So far, I've done the read one and I've done the read all. All right. So the read part of CRUD is done. The order in which we do these, as you know, wouldn't matter. And the way that I did this is next I did an update. So I did an update by ID, which again will have a request, a response, and a response and a next. All right. And again, we're going to come in here like we just talked about and do the movie model. All right. And the movie model dot find by ID and update. So you're really, hopefully at least, starting to see all of the different, MongoDB commands that you can put in here. Okay. So this is find by ID and update. And we need the req.params.movie ID. All right. And we're going to need a little bit more information too, not just that. In other words, we need the ID because that's going to be the document that we want to update. All right. But we'll also need some more information. So what I put in here was name, and I've got req.body.name. All right. I'm not going to lie to you either. I just started running through and testing this stuff. Let me turn on the word wrap. There we go. All right. So I'm hoping there won't be any errors when we end up running this tomorrow. If there are, we'll have to figure out what they are. And again, this can either give me an error or I can have some movie information returned back to me. Just kind of like what we saw before. All right. So we've got all of this now. I'm going to bring this up. All right. So this is our attempt at going in and doing an update. Now, I played around a little bit on this with the patch, but the put seemed to work a lot easier. Remember, The bad thing about using a put is that it expects everything, every field other than the ID field, it expects it to have a value. So when we go into Postman tomorrow and we run this, it will be expecting that there is a value for the title, that there is a value for the year made, that there is a value for the running time, that there is a value for the category, and there is a value for the rating. All right. And like I said, I just had some problems trying to get this to work with patch. So I just did it this way. So if there's an error, we will again next error. So again, that would be if we tried to do an update, put in a wrong ID or did something that was whatever was illegal. You know, maybe we put in a non-numeric value for a numeric field, etc. So if we get down to here, all right, then everything should have worked. We just did the find by ID and update. So we can do a res.json. Probably should just copy this because I keep saying almost the same thing. So the status would be success. We'd have a message in here. And seemed like something like movie updated successfully. And finally, there is no data, so just null. That should be, all right, should be everything that we want to do in here. So far now we've done the RA or the R and the U of CRUD. All right, so we've got to do the D for delete and the C for create. So we're going to do those next. All right, so I'm coming down here. Again, I want a comma here. And next, we'll do the delete. All right, so I've got my delete by ID. As always, REQ, RES, and next. All right. And kind of like we just did before, but this one will be a find by ID and remove. All right. It's almost the same as what we're doing right here. So I'm going to grab this code that's right here. I'm going to just grab all of it. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. And I'm going to come down to here and I'm going to paste it in. Now I've got to make changes. All right. It's not movie find by ID and update. It's movie model dot find by ID and remove. All right. And again, we need the ID. We don't need this stuff. So all we need is the error and the movie info. All right. And again, if it errors out, boom. Otherwise, we don't want to say movie updated successfully. We want to say movie deleted successfully. All right. So we have now gone through the get one, the get all, which was our R component of CRUD. We went through the update, which was our U component of CRUD. And we went through the delete, which is the D component of CRUD. So we've got the RUD of CRUD down. So what's next? And it's not super long. All right, the only one left is create. If you don't like the order in which I did it, of course, you could always change it around if you wanted to do that. All right, so this last one will be create. All right, and this will be movie model. And you'll notice that when I do a dot and I type in a CR, there's create. All right, so we are going to want to do a create right here. And to make my life, at least, a little bit easier, I'm going to go back up to where we had all those fields from before, where we pushed all this stuff right here. Okay. So I'm going to create all this. I shouldn't need when I do this, I shouldn't need an ID. I'm looking at mine and I put ID, title, year, running time. I forgot category here. Idiot. Please go back to yours on the movie model.find. I accidentally forgot that line, so add that line there. Okay. All right. So I'm going to grab these 5 lines that are right here. Okay. And again, I'm looking through my own code as I did this and probably at least finding errors in my own code. I think I am at least. When I did this in my code, all right, movie model.create, and this was the stuff that we want to put in there, of course, I put in the ID, but I shouldn't have to do that because the ID should be put in there for me automatically. All right. Then next, I basically want to do this. So let me move this up as far as I can. All right. And let's see, when we're doing this and we've got this create and all this other stuff that's in here, all right, there's our curly. So we can end our curly right here. And as always, this can give us back either an error, all right, or it can give us back some kind of a result. And again, not trying to confuse you, but you'll see people calling this different stuff in here. All right. And what I mean is sometimes when they do this, they'll call it, whatever it is, movie info or whatever, sometimes just result. All right. I guess it's whatever I felt like doing at the time. So again, if there's an error, you've seen this before again and again and again. All right. So if there's an error, we'll do a next with the error. Otherwise, again, I'm just going to steal this. Otherwise, I don't know what it did there. There it is. Well, we want to say success, but we want to say movie inserted successfully. All right. And that's, I mean, like I said, this is a lot to sit there and really, wrap your head around. So let's just take a second and go through, because this is it for this particular thing. We're going to write the router next. But before we even look at that, let's just go back and take a look at everything that we just added in here from the top. All right. When we want to refer to a MongoDB command, we use this because that's the equivalent of us. If you remember when we went out to mongosjs.com and we did the read the docs and we went to models, there was like a models.create, a models whatever. That's pretty much what we're doing here. All right. But we're saying we're going to refer to this as movie model. All right. Then we came in and we started to do our CRUD operations. So first we attempted, as it says there, to get a single movie, but we wanted just one, and it'll be based off of the ID that we provide. All right. So it's a find by ID. All right. We have to let the system know what the ID is, and that can either fail, meaning we'll have some kind of an error, or it can succeed. If it succeeds, it's basically going to take all that results. So that object, that particular movie object, it's going to grab it and it's going to put it into movie info. So as we say in there, if we get an error, do a next on the error. Otherwise, we'll give back a message that says movie found, and it'll have success for the key and movie found for the value, and then it should show us all of that movie's information. So that was the first one. Then next, we attempt to get each and every movie. Again, I don't know why that's still there, but it is. All right. So we come in and we create an empty array. And then we use the movie model to basically loop through everything that's in the database and populate that particular array movies list with all of the values that are in the database. So we're using the find to do that. Again, this is basically the equivalent of the collection name dot find. So in other words, show me all the records. All right, which can either fail or succeed. If it fails, we're just going to push it off. If it succeeds, now movies is going to hold all that stuff. So we want to loop through that. So let movie of movies, this movie's right here. This is this right here. It's that. All right. So we're telling it to loop through, and for each movie, provide for us the ID, the title, the year made, the running time, the category, and the rating. All right. And I'm not going to lie to you. I watched a bunch of different video presentations, some on YouTube and some on just other things that I was pushed to. And I kind of use this as a kind of a culmination of a bunch of these. All right. So is there a chance that there are going to be errors in here? Of course there is. All right. I just noticed that sometimes they're referring to this as underscore ID and sometimes as ID. I'm not even sure why I did that. All right. But if it found movies, push them all onto that array. Give the user back, let them know a success message rather with the movie found, and then there's the data. All right, that'll be the list of movies. All right, so that's the first two. Then the next one here is to update a single movie. All right. And again, let me look real quick in here. No, that is the same. Okay, I wonder if the reason I'm getting that error there is I shouldn't have this. No, I thought that error right there would go away, and of course it did not. Like I said, I'm constantly going back and trying to make sure I didn't miss anything with my curly braces. And I don't see anything that's missing, so I'm still not sure why that is giving me the red underline, but it is. All right, so this is our attempt to update. And when we attempt to update, we are using the update by ID. So of course we need an ID. All right. And again, that will either fail or it will succeed. And if I look again, I misspell that, of course. So that should say movie info right there. So if it succeeds, and if it succeeds, we should come up there and we should say success, movie updated successfully. There is no data. It was just an update. All right. Okay. I'll try to fix this because, like I said, I don't like this at all that it's doing that. But okay, so we've gone through here and we've now done the update and we've done the read. So this is attempt to delete a single movie. I'll look at this during the break and see if I can figure out why I'm getting those errors. All right, so this will be our delete by ID. So again, from the movie model, we're calling find by ID and remove, which again can either succeed or it can fail. We need it to give us the ID that we're attempting to remove. So this right here, that's going to be the ID that we end up putting into Postman, for example, with a delete request. All right. If it fails, as we always do, we just say next error. Otherwise, we're sending back a message that the movie was successfully deleted and there is no data because the record's been deleted. All right. And then finally, we've got to create, which of course is the attempt to insert a new movie. All right. And we come in there and we attempt then from the movie model to call create. We attempt to go in and add the title, the year made, the running time, the category, and the rating. And again, this can either succeed or fail. And if you go, well, how could it fail? Well, remember, year made is supposed to be a number. If we left it blank or put in something non-numeric, same kind of thing. All these fields are required when we set up the schema. So there's a lot of ways in which this could conceivably fail. All right. So if it does, we'll handle it there. Otherwise, we just success and we give a message that the movie was inserted successfully. All right. And that's it. I'm going to go during the break because I'm going to give us a break in just a second. All right. But when we get back from the break or during the break, I'm going to look through this and see if I can figure out what all these errors they're giving me here. So I'm going to run through that, and if I find out anything, I'll show it back up again on the screen as soon as we come back. All right. It is about 3 minutes after 1. So let's come back, please, in 12 minutes at 1:15. And when we do, we're going to write the movies.js route. All right. So that'll be next. All right. All right, during the break, I dug through this and I found 3 errors. So I'm going to show those to you right now. I've got them annotated in here, and then we'll move on. I believe all the things that were wrong in here, there's nothing underlined anymore. But when you come in here at the end of the first one that we put in, which was get by ID, which is right here. All right, you need to add this, which I believe was not there before. All right, so as long as after the else, you have your curly for ending the else, you've got this one right here, which goes with this. And then we've got this last one here that goes with this. All right, and I had that missing. So it's my line 19. Again, yours, depending on how you set yours up, could be different, and I apologize for that. All right, that was the first thing. That got rid of the errors quite a ways down. But then when I went to the bottom of the next one, which was the get all, I had to do the same thing. So those either were removed, they were not in there, or the comma was not in there. I don't remember. I think they weren't in there. So that, again, fixed up quite a few. So we need, in other words, we need to go in and add this for the get by ID, and you need to add another one for the get all. All right, that fixed a lot of the errors. And then finally, I had to add this. So this was in the delete by ID. I didn't have that in there. All right. And I had an extra curly brace down near the very bottom. So all those errors are gone. Now, we're going to go on and we're going to do the movie route. But before we do, all right, again, I'm having issues in that half of the class is getting the work done, is doing everything they're supposed to do, etc., and half is not. All right. I decided to go through this example and go do this example so we could basically kind of move on from here. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But at least what you're going to be able to see when we run through and try to test this tomorrow is you're going to notice that how you are going to be able to get in, you'll be able to go in and set up. Basically, you'll be able to register, and then you'll be able to authenticate. And once you've done both those, you will be able to go in and do different things with this movies database. All right. So we're going to look at that, like I said, in a little more depth and breadth of coverage tomorrow. I am going to ask, even if yours doesn't end up working, all right, rather than me just going and posting this out there and just putting it out on GitHub, well, I mean, I wanted you guys to basically key this in with me and as an assignment or part of an assignment. So even if for some reason when we get all done, if you have an error or something, I'd still want you to turn it in and you'll get most of the credit. All right. But like I said, I've got to find some way to make sure that these people who are doing the minimum in here start pulling their share. All right, end of my sermon here. So that's the end of that one. So again, I'm going to do a file save. And now I'm going to go, and I actually put this in during the break, probably shouldn't have, but in routes, we want to add a new movies.js. So I want you to go to your routes folder now. So far today, we first came in and under models, we made a movies.js. So we've now got a movies.js and a users.js. Right before the break, we added a movies.js to the controllers. So again, we've got a movies.js and a users.js in the controllers. Well, now in the routes, I want you to create a movies.js in there also. So in the routes, there will also be a movies.js and a users.js. The good news is this file is fairly short. It's right here. So I'm going to just, let me walk you through it. Oops. And I don't know why I put the curlies in there. I've gone back and forth with, should we put curlies on the end of these lines or should we not? Sometimes I'll put them in and I'll be like, then later I'll just remove them. All right, because I don't think it's a good idea. All right, so taking this from the top, as always, we've got to add express. We've got to go in there and we have to add or set up our router. And then we have to bring in the movie controller because remember, the routes are all based off of the controller. All right, and I don't know how I got that. I think that looks like this. All right, so we're bringing in Express, we're bringing in the Express router, and we're bringing in the movie controller. All right, so this is saying that when I go out here and I do this, I want to basically go out and get everything. All right, when I post, I want to create a new movie. When I put an ID in here, I want to do a get by ID. When I do a put with an ID, I want to do an update by ID. And when I do a delete with the ID, I want to call delete by ID. Now, did I go through that quickly? Of course I did. But that said, ideally at least, all that makes sense to you because all we're doing is some mapping in here. All right. So we're saying, hey, if that's the route, that's the associated controller routine. If that's the route, that's the associated controller routine. You hopefully get what I'm talking about. And for the get, when we're getting everything, you'll notice there is no ID that's passed in. For the post, there's never going to be an ID that's passed in. But for the get a single movie or the put a single movie or the delete a single movie, there is an ID that's added. And when you look at the different routines that are being called, there's a get all versus a get by ID. All right, there's an update by ID and there's a delete by ID. Those names in here. So for instance, this get by ID, that has to be the same as the get by ID that we put in here. So that name has to match that name, etc. All right, because again, that's the mapping that's taking place. All right, hopefully at least that made at least a little bit of sense, and hopefully this is making a little bit of sense to you. All right, one thing that I'm going to do, and I should have done it already, but at the end of this semester, I think you all know this, you will all do a course evaluation. And if you think, this was terrible or whatever, then you put that down. I've talked to Mr. Gudmestead because he's teaching the class as well. And he's not exactly doing it in the way that I'm doing it, but we're covering the same material. He's changing the order around and the like. And I have asked him, because when I taught this last time, we didn't have a book either. And I told him, I think this class needs a book. I mean, it needs something where you've got a running case study or something like that in there. I think that would be very helpful. But since we don't have one, I've been creating my own. And as you can tell from the beginning of the semester, it's kind of with mixed success. We try doing something and it appears to work pretty well. We do something else and it doesn't appear to work that well. All right. But I think if we had a textbook, I think it would work better. Reason I'm telling you that is when you fill out your course evaluations, all right, I want you to be honest. You rate three things. You rate the course, you rate the instructor, and you rate the textbook. Well, there's no textbook to rate. All right, so I've given you a lot of URLs and a lot of videos that you can go out and look at. I've given you some Word documents that I've taken off, from articles, etc. But if you think that's insufficient, please, by all means, put that down. If you like the way it is, put that down. If you like the way the class is run, put that down. If you've got problems with it, put all of them down. And the same thing is when you're discussing the instructor. You want to bash me? That's your chance. I never see one comment that any of you make. All that they end up doing is they give me a summary. All right. And I get numbers on there. I got, 1 to 5. I got 1, 1. I got 2 3s. I got 3 5s, whatever. That's all that I see. All right. Now my boss looks at those comments. And if there's a running comment, he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Well, then he's going to sit and have a talk with me. All right. Okay. Enough. So let me do another file save all here. You should have had time to put that in. And now we're going to go back to our app.js file. All right, because now we should be able to put some stuff in here. All right. So we've got our express, we've got our logger, we've got our body parser, etc. So we're going to start adding a couple more things in here. All right. The first thing that we're going to come in and we're going to add in here is, do it right down here. That's fine. We're going to add a couple things. Okay. And we're going to create a file in just a couple minutes. Okay. And in that file, all right, in that file, we are going to put some database stuff in there. So I'm going to actually say this, const mongoose equals, and I'm going to put in here require, and we're going to have in just a second a config file, which is, a config file, which is going to have a file in it called database.js. Don't worry, that file isn't there yet. It's not going to hurt anything. All right. Now, the other thing we want to do too is we want to make sure that we have set up our database. I'm sorry. The other thing we want to do is, we want to basically set up our database configuration. So what does that mean? Well, we've got some of the stuff we need, but we're going to need this secret key. All right. And we're going to need to basically set up JWT. And again, if you say, I don't get it, well, then just watch. These things or the JWT can change every time we go and run the program. So I'm going to use a let rather than a constant in here. So I'm going to say let JWT equal require JSON web token. All right. I'm not going to go over JSON web token because we looked at that yesterday. All right. So we've already done our app up here, our const app. So one more line that I want to write here is app.set. And we're going to set a secret key. And this is something that's going to be used internally by the system. You can call this anything you want. I mean, when you're testing, you might call it secret key. All right, I just called mine node REST API. You can, like I said, though, it can be called virtually anything. All right. Now, when we come in here and we are working, all right, we are working with this secret token. And when we're trying to connect to the database, it can succeed or it can fail. All right. So I put this line in here. All right. We may not end up needing it, but I think we will, just in case there's any kind of an error. So it's going to be mongoose dot, and it's not recognizing it, which isn't a great sign, dot connection dot on. And when there's an error, we are going to tell it to console dot error, and we're going to go over all this in just a second, dot bind, and I'm going to put this on a new line just so you can see everything that I'm typing in as I put this over multiple lines. So let me move this over here, and I'm going to say console MongoDB connection error. All right, and let's take a second and go over, whoops, don't need that, and go over what this means. Okay, there we go. All right. The first thing you may or may not have noticed is this is the first time ever, and maybe Mr. Gudmisted showed you this in the AWD1111 class. I don't know. But not only is there a console.log, There is a console.log, there is a console.error, and there is a I believe there's a console.warning. The only difference between those is the color in which your text appears. With console.log, it's black. With console.error, it's red. And with console.warning, I believe it's like a cyan or something like that. All right. Okay. We've got our app.use. We had problems with this. I'm going to try to bring that back, but I had problems with that logging. We've got our use statements in here. All right. Nothing new in there. Okay. This was basically if we went out to the home page, etc. All right. And what else do we have in here? Right now, not too much. So after that app.get where we put that in there, okay, we don't have this stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some routes in here. All right. What do I mean? Well, again, I'm going to come in here and do this. App.use, and we're going to say when you go to /users, that the route that you want to be dealing with is going to be the user's route. In other words, that's telling it that we're going to want to use users.js. All right. Okay. Now you might think, well, too, don't we want to put in this? Don't we want to put in app.use? Well, when we go to /movies, that we want to use movies. And the answer is yes. All right. But if the user goes to that movies thing, if they go there, that we should make sure they've been validated first. So we're going to write another route a little bit later that's called validate user. It's not very long. It's about 10 or 15 lines. And we're telling it that. All right. Now there's other stuff that we can worry about in here if we want to. Things like favicon, you may or may not remember that. So that if you go out there and do something with a favicon, I'm not even going to worry about that. All right. But this validate user, this is going to be a routine that we're going to write. All right. And we can write it basically anywhere we want. Okay. It's not a route. It's actually a function that's going to be used as part of this program. So the reason I'm telling you that is I put it right here. So I've got here validate user. Oops. So validate user, and again, with a request, a response, and a next. I did that. Let's look. Get rid of that. All right. And here we have to actually come in and we have to call, for lack of better words, one of our JWT things, jwt.verify. You're going to see all this stuff tomorrow. When you set up the headers, you have to basically come in and do an req.headers x access token. All right. X access token. I just put this over multiple lines, and req.app.get, our secret key. And that can come back either with an error or the decoded information that we want. Right. And this will be just a little bit different. What we're going to say here is if there was an error, rather than just doing a next error, which is what we've been doing virtually since we started doing this, we're instead going to say res.json, and we're going to give a status of error and a message, err.message, and there is no data. Didn't work. Data null. All right. What this is saying is we're checking for a situation where we do not have our headers set up correctly. All right. Now I'm looking at this, we're going to figure out what these errors in here are in just a second. All right. Now, if it's an else in here, all right, then what we want to do is we want to add the user ID to the request. And again, that probably makes little to no sense. You're going to see it in action, all right, tomorrow. And I don't know how much longer I'm going to lecture today, but the reason I'm not showing it to you today is I've only done some of the testing. I want the whole thing to be tested and the whole thing to work. All right, I hate these things where I bring something in and then we go to test it and it doesn't work. All right, so req.body.user ID equals decoded.id and then next. Next. All right, got our paren. We've got a. That may have fixed all the errors. Nope, I thought maybe it would have fixed the errors we had up above. It did not. All right, we need a curly down at the bottom here. Okay, that actually is everything. So let's see if we can figure out what this error is here. So validate user. Next. Arrow, curly brace. It is saying that there was a semicolon expected there. This needs to say function in front of it. Maybe not. All right, I'm going to look at that during the next break, but I'm trying to figure out what the problem is. Yeah, something is hosed up in here, and I will fix that, and I will give you that by no later than tomorrow. Okay. All right. Couple more things that we're going to put in here. All right. You may or may not be aware of this. So get down to the bottom here if you would. So we're right up above our app.listen. Okay. Now this, you can see this is crashing. I will work on that. It'll be fixed by tomorrow. All right. Express itself doesn't consider 404 as actually being an error. Now I'm saying express here. I'm not saying node, etc. I'm saying express does not. So when we get a 404 for a file not found, we want to be able to handle that ourselves. All right. So I'm going to put another app.use statement in here. Do it the new way. So we'll say let ERR equals new error not found. We'll set our error status equal to 404, and we'll let the system handle it. We're, again, basically just alerting the system that there isn't, this is how we're going to handle errors. Now, there's other errors. There's other errors that we can have in addition to this. All right. And what I mean by that is there's not just a file not found with a 404. There's a 500 error, which is an error on the server side. There are different 300 errors where you're doing redirects and they maybe try to redirect you to a file that doesn't exist, etc. So this routine that was right here, for lack of better words, is meant to handle the 404 error. All right. Then down below that, we're going to put in a generic error handler. All right. So again, it'll be just like we did before, an app.use. In fact, I'm just going to steal this whole line of code right here. Put it right there. All right. And what do we want to do? Well, we can console.log the error. So at least on the screen, we can see what the error is. All right. Again, I said this many times before, but that's the kind of thing that you would want to remove. You would want to remove that when you're done testing before you go into an actual application mode. All right. Now, we've already handled this, but the two types of errors we're probably going to get in here are either a 404 or a 500. That doesn't mean we can't get other ones, but almost always it's going to be one or the other. Now, we should have handled the 404 up here, but this basically is just letting it know that 404 is an error. So we're going to come down here and we're going to say if error.status equal 404, right? We'll do a res.status of a 404.json, and we'll just give it a message that just says not found. Oops, I have to put message there. Remember, anytime we put in, this is a JSON object, so it needs both a key, which is message, and a value, which is not found. All right, if it's not that, all right, I mean, we could just say here, these are the only two errors I can think of that are going to happen, are going to be a 404 or they're going to be a 500 error. So we'll do a res.status 500.json. And again, we're just going to come up again with a message. And it just says something wrong. Something wrong on server end. Okay. All right. There's just one more thing that I want us to do in here right now, and that is I want us to set up our database connection. Okay, what do I mean? You're going to see it in just a second, but there's a few too many blank lines in there. Now I'm getting this because of the error that I still have up here. I believe once that error is gone, and I'll look at that during the break. All right. But once that error is gone, I think that'll be gone too. But what we can do is we can basically come in and we can write one more file today. In that config folder, there's nothing in there currently. in the config folder, that's typically where you put your database configuration information. All right. So I'm going to come up to this config folder, and in here, I'm going to add a new file that I'm going to call database.js, and it's only going to have 5 or 6 lines in it. All right. So I'm going to say const. This is basically, I'll put a comment in here. Set up the MongoDB Mongoose connection. All right. So const mongoose equals require mongoose. Nothing new there. We've done that before. Const MongoDB, and that's going to be equal to, this is where we're putting the path. Now, my database for the movies is called Greatest Movies. Yours may be called something else. So I'm going to put in here the path to this. I'm going to put Greatest Movies on the end. If you called yours Movies DB or whatever, you'll want to change it to that. So again, it's MongoDB : / localhost, and I think you don't need the : 27017. It may give me an error with this. We'll see. All right. And then the name of the database, which is Greatest Movies. All right. 3 more lines and we're done. We need a mongoose.connect. And what do we want to connect to? To MongoDB. That's actually trying to connect to our database. All right. We need a mongoose.promise. And that's going to be equal to global.promise. And that's just some internal stuff that you have to do for the system. All right. And finally, we want to say module.exports equals mongoose. All right. There is one more thing that we will need to do, but we'll do this first tomorrow. I've got one more route for us to write, but I haven't gotten a chance to test that route to make sure that it's correct. It's not long. It's literally about 15 lines. So tomorrow when we come in, we will do that one first, and then we will begin going out and going into Postman and actually trying to come in and test this. All right. So that's what I've got done. The other thing, again, I've got to finish, and I'm going to look at that right now, but I'm not going to sit there and make you watch me try to sit and debug something as I flounder away. But that is, I've got to fix this thing. And I will, because I'm going to go look it up right now. Something in here, as far as the way I set this up, was wrong. It's pretty obvious. All right. So I will fix that. As soon as I figure out what it is, I will let you know tomorrow what that is. All right. And once we do, then we'll take it from there. We'll write our last route, and then we'll go down and attempt to start testing this. All right. So that's what I have today. Thanks for sticking around, and I will talk to you then tomorrow.